Sophia, the central figure of Gnosticism, never once asked what her soul's purpose was. Not in any of the 13 hymns of the Pistis Sophia, not in a single fragment from Nag Hammadi. In over 1,800 years of verified Gnostic text, that question simply does not exist. There is a belief embedded inside every purpose methodology, inside every questionnaire, every course, every self-knowledge book that is doing the exact opposite of what it promises. The more carefully you follow its instructions, the further you move from what you came to find. If you think clarity of purpose is a matter of deeper self-knowledge, what Sophia, the Corpus Hermeticum, and the neuroscience of Harvard converge to say will change what you do on Monday morning. Why would the act of searching actively block the very thing you're trying to access? What was Sophia actually asking instead? And what if your soul's purpose was never absent, only covered? It was a Saturday afternoon, third consecutive year, answering questionnaires about what my life's purpose was. The same handwriting in the margins. The same hollow feeling when I reached the last page, that something important had just slipped past me again without ever becoming clear. I was not someone who gave up easily. I was someone who kept trying, but I had never once stopped to ask whether the trying itself was the problem. Every questionnaire started with the same premise, that I didn't know, that the purpose was somewhere ahead of me, that I needed to search. That Saturday, I put the questionnaire down and opened the Pistis Sophia, not for the first time, for the 10th. But something was different in that reading, something in how I was holding the text. I had read it 9 times with the question active, what does this tell me about what I should be doing with my life? The 10th time, that question was simply gone. Something that had been loud in me had quietly stopped. In the first 3 hymns of Sophia, the one scholars call the hymns of lament and return, she wasn't saying, I don't know who I am. She was saying, I remembered where I came from. I stopped reading. I went back. I reread it 3 times, not because the words were difficult, because something in them had already shifted before I understood what it was. Sophia wasn't seeking what she didn't have. She was remembering what had been covered. Those are 2 completely different processes. And I had spent 3 years inside the wrong one. A search methodology assumes the object is absent, and an amnesis practice assumes it is covered. The difference is not spiritual, it is operational. It changes what you do on a Monday morning. There is one question Sophia never asked, and it is exactly the one you keep asking. Before we continue, I need to break a reading that always comes up when I explore this topic. Most people hear soul's purpose and think of vocation, career, what you came to do in the world in a practical and visible way. Purpose methodologies work within that frame. Find what lights you up, follow the energy, discover your mission. The structure is always the same, you at the center of a search, purpose as a destination. What the Pistis Sophia presents is something else entirely. Sophia didn't lose vocation. She descended to the boundary of the pleroma, the realm where the divine mind meets matter, and she forgot her origin. Not because she didn't know, because the descent covered what she always was. The difference between not knowing and forgetting is not semantic. It is the foundation of an entirely different method. If you don't know, you search outside, you test, you acquire, you accumulate new frameworks. If you forgot, you remember within, you strip, clear, listen. And remembering is a completely different practice from searching, not one more step on the same path. A different path, moving in the opposite direction. Let me make this concrete with a text that stopped me cold. The Corpus Hermeticum is a collection of Greek-Egyptian texts from the 2nd century of the Common Era. The academic reference translation is by Brian Copenhaver from Cambridge University Press, published in 1992. Treatise 1, verse 6. That light, he said, am I, thy God, mind prior to the moist nature. The soul does not descend empty. It descends with the Nous, the divine mind, embedded within it. not as a future promise, as a fact already accomplished before any search begins, before any question is even asked. And in chapter 7 of the same corpus, Hermes describes the obstacle. What prevents access to the Nous is not its absence, it is sleep, the state where the soul is occupied with what it finds outside and forgets what it carries within. The soul's purpose in the Corpus Hermeticum is not a destination to be reached, it is a passenger that never left. So close it seems absent, so present the search passes right over it. That was the shock that needed to happen inside me that Saturday, not a new discovery, a recognition of what had always been the case and what 3 years of searching had kept me too busy to notice. There is a reason you haven't recognized your soul's purpose yet, and it is not what any spiritual teacher has told you. It is not lack of clarity. It is not that the signal hasn't arrived yet. It isn't even that your purpose is hidden. When you search for your soul's purpose, your brain enters a specific neural state that blocks exactly the layer of consciousness where your purpose already exists. The search itself is the blockage. In the Hermetic tradition, this was called sleep, the state described in the Corpus Hermeticum where the Nous is completely present but inaccessible because the mind is busy searching for what it already carries. I call it the anamnesis drift. And Sophia identified it in the 3rd century before neuroscience had the tools to map it. The question was never, what is my soul's purpose? Sophia never asked that question. She asked, how do I return to what I always was? That single shift changes everything about what you do next. Stay until the end of this video. The link in the description is there, waiting. I need to name the hidden premise embedded inside every purpose methodology. It isn't in the titles of the books, it isn't in the course descriptions, it's in the structure of the questions they ask. What lights you up presupposes you haven't arrived at what lights you up yet. What is your mission presupposes the mission isn't active yet. Discover your purpose. The word discover already embedded absence before you answered a single thing. Every one of those questions instructs your brain to confirm an absence, and a brain instructed to confirm absence will find absence in every result it produces. This is not metaphor. This is how the autobiographical self functions, the layer of consciousness that processes language and narrative about oneself. When you ask a search question, you activate the search state. The search state confirms there is something to be found, that it hasn't been found yet. And the cycle continues. The principle of mentalism, the first of the 7 Hermetic principles from the Kabbalion, states that the universe is mental, that the state of mind creates the state of experience. A mind in search mode creates a universe where purpose is always one step ahead, never here, never now. And the disturbing thing is that this feels like progress. Every new book, every new method, every new apparent clarity feels like you are getting closer. The premise keeps you searching because it was built to keep you searching. The hidden premise of every purpose search may be the exact cause of the feeling that purpose is missing, from myth to mechanism. Because it isn't enough to know that Sophia remembered. I need to understand how that process works in the texts. The Pistis Sophia, a verified Gnostic text from Nag Hammadi, dated to the 3rd century of the Common Era, edited by G.R.S. Mead in 1921, presents Sophia as the aeon representing divine wisdom in its most vulnerable form. She descended to the boundary of the pleroma. The encounter with matter covered what she always was, and the texts do not treat that covering as a tragedy. They treat it as the condition that makes return possible. Her 13 hymns are not hymns of discovery, they are hymns of return. I remembered where I came from, not I discovered where I was. The Apocryphon of John, also from Nag Hammadi, a Gnostic text from the 2nd to 3rd century, edited by Marvin Meyer in 2009, goes one level deeper. Every soul descends with a seed of light. The text uses the Greek phrase sperma tou photos, seed of light, a signature of origin already planted before incarnation. The demiurge in the Gnostic system attempts to cover that seed, but cannot extinguish what was placed by the superior mind. It can cover, it cannot erase. What we call not knowing my purpose is the action of noise, of the world, of search methodologies, of the wrong questions upon a seed that remains intact beneath the covering. Sophia whispers so that you may recognize her, not discover her. Now the Egyptian tradition. Because Thoth is not merely a symbolic figure here, he has a specific and verifiable function. The Ba is the aspect of the soul that carries the individual divine mission. The researcher Jan Assmann in The Mind of Egypt, published by Metropolitan Books in 2002, documents that Thoth, as scribe of the gods, was the guardian of the record of each Ba from the very beginning. The ceremony of the weighing of the heart in the Hall of Ma'at, as described in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, is not where the Ba discovers its mission. It is where the Ba accounts for how faithfully it lived it. The purpose was already recorded before birth. The ceremony does not reveal what was unknown. It reflects what was always inscribed. Thoth confirms what was always written. Assmann writes, Thoth maintained the library of the gods with Seshat. The record of each existence was cosmic prior to the individual. The purpose does not need to be found at the hour of death. It was recorded before birth. Here is the conflict I want to name precisely. There is the perspective of the self-knowledge industry, and there is the Hermetic perspective. They are not merely different, they are opposite on one critical point. The industry says you need to find your purpose. Searching is the method. More clarity, more self-knowledge, more questions, and purpose emerges. Hermeticism says you need to remember what you always were. Searching, executed with the premise of absence, may be the obstacle, not the path. And now neuroscience enters, not as spiritual decoration, as independent evidence from a third field that arrived at the same conclusion through an entirely different route. Antonio Damasio, neuroscientist at the University of Southern California, maps 3 layers of the self in Self Comes to Mind, published by Pantheon Books in 2010. The first layer, the proto-self, automatic visceral regulation. You don't consciously control it, it runs beneath everything you think you are. The second layer, the core self, moment-to-moment consciousness. It operates without language, without narrative, without searching. It is the layer that orients the organism before the brain formulates any question in words. The third layer, the autobiographical self, the layer that tells stories about itself, that answers questionnaires, that searches for purpose. It is also the most disturbed by social context, by the opinions of others, by market trends, by career expectations. The search for purpose happens almost entirely in the autobiographical self, the most superficial of the 3 layers. But the layer that already knows, the core self, operates before any question, before any narrative about who you should be. Sophia does not speak at the level of the stories you tell about yourself. She speaks at the layer that precedes any story. That layer does not respond to questions. It does not produce answers in the form you expect. It simply orients the way a compass orients, without being asked, without effort, without needing to be told which direction is north. The industry works with the autobiographical self and produces more narrative. Hermeticism points to the core self and proposes silence. It was never about finding your purpose. It never was. Let me be precise about what it was. It was about removing what covers what you always were. That distinction changes what you do concretely, because if it's about finding, you search outside, you test identities, you answer more questionnaires, you wait for the signal, you measure clarity. If it's about removing, you ask what is covering it, you identify the noise, you silence what competes with the layer that already knows. And here comes a piece of scientific evidence that affected me more than I expected. The default mode network, DMN, was documented by Randy Buckner and colleagues in 2008 in research from Harvard University and Massachusetts General Hospital, published in the Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences. The DMN is the neural network active during rest, but also active during rumination, during worry, during automatic self-directed thought. And this is what affected me. During the state of searching for purpose. When you ruminate about who you are, what you want, what your mission is, what you haven't found yet, you are using the neural network of automatic thinking, the network of worry, the network that the Corpus Hermeticum called sleep. The same Buckner study shows that experienced meditators present reduced DMN activity. And what do they report in that state? A kind of clarity that people describe as already knowing, as if the answer had been there all along and the noise was covering it. Hermeticism called this anamnesis. Plato called it recognition. Buckner at Harvard documented the neural basis of the same process. 3 traditions, 3 vocabularies, 1 location. The search activates the network of noise. The silencing of noise activates the layer that already knows. It was never about finding. It was about stopping a specific kind of searching. Stopping, not as abandonment, not as passivity, but as the release of a grip that was too tight around something that was never going to arrive through effort. At the beginning of this video, I said that Sophia never asked the question you keep asking, that she never asked, "What is my purpose?" Now I can say why that matters, not only inside Gnostic theology, but inside every tradition that touched this same territory. Plato, in the Meno and the Phaedo, texts from the 4th century before the Common Era, called anamnesis, the process by which the soul recognizes truths it always carried, not learning something new, remembering what was there before the forgetting. The soul, for Plato, knew the truth before incarnating. What we call learning is always recognition of something pre-existing, never the creation of something absent. And Sophia in Proverbs 8, Hebrew text that researchers date between the 8th and 5th centuries before the Common Era, was present before creation. Verse 22, "The Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old." Sophia, Chokmah in Hebrew, wisdom, did not emerge after the world was created. She was before it. She does not search for purpose. She is purpose in a state prior to material existence. If the soul carries a spark of that wisdom, as the Apocryphon of John affirms with the spermato photos, then the soul's purpose also precedes the world. It cannot be found in the world because it never left you. The spark of light was planted before you were born. Everything I've brought so far converges now in one place. Sophia forgot. She did not stop knowing. Thoth recorded before you asked. The Apocryphon of John planted the seed before birth. Damasio identified the layer that already knows without language. Buckner mapped the neural network that searching activates and the state that produces clarity when it falls silent. And there is one final element I want to bring. The Egyptian initiatic tradition, preserved in The Union of Isis and Thoth by Normandy Ellis and Nikki Scully, published by Inner Traditions in 2015. I declare with transparency, this is a work of esoteric tradition, not a verified archaeological text. But the distinction it presents is relevant. Isis, in this tradition, did not search for what Thoth knew. She was initiated. She received rather than discovered. The purpose of Isis was not found on a journey of self-knowledge. It was transmitted when she became still enough to receive what Thoth already held. The model of Isis is the model I propose, not searching, but receiving, recognition, anamnesis, and now I'll name what was at stake in all those centuries of text. The question Sophia never asked was, what is my soul's purpose? She asked, How do I return to what I always was? That is the difference. A search question, a return question. Now the hidden mechanism, what no one is naming with precision. The effort of searching for your soul's purpose requires a belief, the belief that you don't have it yet. Without that belief, the search makes no sense. You don't look for what you already know you have. And believing you don't have it, according to the Hermetic principle of mentalism, creates exactly the mental state that blocks recognition. The search encodes absence. A mind that has encoded absence will confirm absence in every result it finds. More books, more apparent clarity, more confirmation that something is still missing. The cycle sustains itself because the original premise remains intact beneath every new attempt. I call this cycle the anamnesis drift, the state where the mind searches for what was never lost, and by searching, drives away access to what has always been present. It is not confusion, it is not a lack of effort. It is a very precise error, the error of applying the wrong kind of attention to something that does not respond to attention of that kind. Sophia remembered when the hymns of return no longer began with, "Where is my purpose?" but with, "I remembered where I came from." The shift was not in content, it was in the question. Damasio demonstrated that the core self, the layer that already knows, does not operate with language. It does not process questions about identity. It operates before verbal formulation. What accesses that layer is not a better answer to a search question. It is the silencing of what covers it. Most spiritual channels, including ones I admire, teach finding purpose as if it were buried somewhere. When I read the Pistis Sophia carefully, Sophia was not searching for the purpose she didn't have. She forgot the purpose she always was. That difference of one word changes the entire method. If you forgot, you don't need to find, you need to remember. And remembering is not a more refined search. It is the end of a specific kind of searching. My thesis is this: the soul's purpose is not a destination you haven't reached yet. It is a pattern of expression that you already live when you stop asking yourself if you're living it. What inside you never needed to be learned. That is the Hermetic Anamnesis Protocol, the inversion of the question that replaces searching. Sophia forgot and remembered. Thoth never erased the record. The Nous descended with you. The seed of light is intact. What you call searching for purpose may be the only obstacle between you and the purpose you already are. I organized the 7 questions of Thoth, the protocol that replaces searching with recognitions, in a material that is in the description. It is not a vocation test. It is not a 7-step purpose guide. It is an anamnesis protocol based on what Sophia, Thoth, and the neuroscience of Damasio converged upon across centuries and independent disciplines. For those who already feel that the answer is closer than it seems, this may be what was missing to stop searching and begin living from what has always been active. What we saw today is that the obstacle is not lack of knowledge, it is the anamnesis drift, the state your mind enters when it searches for what was never lost. I spent months organizing what Sophia's return actually looks like as a daily practice, grounded in the Pistis Sophia, the Corpus Hermeticum, and the neuroscience of Damasio's core self. The result is the Anamnesis Trilogy, 3 complete guides. The first maps the drift and exactly what it does to your access. The second gives you the 7 questions of Thoth, the protocol that replaces searching with recognition. The third shows what becomes possible when you stop searching and begin living from what has always been inscribed in you. All 3 are inside the Anamnesi app, accessible from any device, designed for practice, not just reading. The link is in the description. If what we covered today resonated, that is not coincidence. That is already recognition beginning. At the beginning of this video, I said that Sophia never asked the question you ask every day. Now you know what that question is, and you know what she asked instead. From perpetual purpose seeker to anamnesis practitioner, The first is a role you inhabit while waiting for purpose to arrive. The second is a recognition that it was always already here, waiting not for you to find it, but for you to stop looking past it. That is the identity shift that Sophia, Thoth, Plato, Damasio, and Buckner each describe in the vocabulary of their own time, each arriving at the same place. The purpose never left. Thoth recorded it. The Nous descended with it. The seed is intact. What changes is not the purpose. It is the question you use to access it.